everyone. Welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. I'm your host, Juliana. Before the episode, I have got to share one of my absolute favorite ride essentials, the Cyc Plus Smart Pump. This little thing goes everywhere with me. It's compact, powerful, and honestly a game changer on the bike. I love using it mid-ride when switching between terrains. I can drop the pressure for gravel and then pump it back up when I hit the road. Super easy, super fast. And of course, it's a total lifesaver in case of a flat or any loss of air. No stress, no hand pumping. Just press the button and go. You can grab yours with 10% off using my code ZONE2SPEAK. Link and details are in the episode notes. Trust me, once you try it, you won't leave for a ride without it. Cyc Plus Smart Pump. Smart, simple, and ready for any adventure. Now, let's hear it for the episode. Today on Zone to Speak, I'm diving into one of cycling's most overlooked yet universally dreaded challenges, staying healthy on the bike, with someone uniquely positioned to help riders to do just that. My guest today is Kat Stene, an Australian sports physiotherapist who has made Girona her home and a hub for cycling wellness. As the founder and director at Forca13, Kat has spent nearly 2 decades treating athletes, specializing in complex hip and spine biomechanics, and building a space where riders, therapists, trainers, and movement professionals come together in community and collaboration. From private work with pro cyclists to hands-on support for weekend warriors, Kat's name has become linked to trusted performance care in Girona, a city that's become a pilgrimage point for cyclists from all over the world. Today, we'll talk about how Forca13 grew into a go-to for pros and passionate riders, and because riders have faced them at some point, we are going deep into saddle sore prevention and management, what they are, why they happen, and how to handle them without derailing your training or adventures. Let's get into it. Kat, welcome to Zone to Speak.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. So, why Girona? Cycling culture isn't just about roads and routes, it's also about community, support. For Girona to have become one of the world's elite cycling destination, there has to be a story there. Can you take me back to what brought you from Australia to Girona in the first place and why this town has become such a powerful base for cyclists and movement professionals?
So for us, it was a little bit of a roundabout way to get here. We never actually moved to Girona for myself working in cycling or professional cyclists. My husband and I are originally from Australia. We moved to England for 5 years, and then we actually just made a health decision. We decided that London wasn't the best place to be healthy, and we kind of missed the sunshine of Australia, but we still loved to be in Europe. We just went on a bike packing trip where we put everything in storage and then rode our bikes,
Wow.
down initially out of England and down the west coast of France, down to San Sebastian, then across the Pyrenees. And we just happened to stop in Girona, and we had been there once before, but I didn't love it because it was cold in February. So I was like, no, I don't want to live in Girona. It's too cold. And then we happened to arrive in the middle of summer and it was gorgeous. And we met some good people, went on some rides, and then talked around with some people and was like, oh, actually, there are quite a few cyclists that are here. This could be a place that we could set up a base, and I could probably find some work to work as a sports physio. Because at that time I wasn't a professional working with professional cyclists. I was actually I'd previously worked with football players, professional
Wow.
soccer football players in
Okay.
Australia. So I'd already worked a lot with pelvises and in sports. And then we made the choice because we found Girona was a good mix of the weather is good, the food is good. You can access, obviously wonderful cycling, road and gravel and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And so we just sort of took a bit of a risk and went, well, let's just try it. And that was now 7 years ago. And I think it's the best move we've ever made. So the thing I think that attracted us to Girona is the thing that attracts a lot of other people. So you have the professional cyclists who just have so many choice of road routes that they can do, and also a lot of professional gravel riders that live in Girona now as well, because the gravel scene is really big here.
Yeah.
And it gives them so much access to different routes that they can basically train, and the weather is usually very good. And so I think once you have a lot of professionals coming here, that starts to attract people like myself who are the support staff. So if you then have more support staff that can make a living and can make this their home, that then it can attract more people. So when someone comes for a holiday, or they do a training camp here and they realize there are all these services, that then becomes more attractive. So I think over time, these last few years, there's just been this build up of support network, and therefore more riders and then more support network. And so now it's just such an easy place for someone, particularly an English speaker from overseas. If you're coming to Europe for international competitions, it's a very easy place to set up, because there's a lot of people that will speak your language. You can access a lot of these services that are otherwise hard in other places that have good cycling routes as well. But Girona has this mix of not just good roads, but also these other services that make living here really, really beneficial and just a great place to live. So I think it's just Girona's been in this really niche area where it's got a lot of natural support. And then also now this extra support has been growing over the last few years.
Yeah, I lived in Girona. I moved not long ago and I'm in Sevilla now, and I can totally see that. I mean, Sevilla is amazing. I think it's one of the places that you can still experience authentic Spanish living because it's not as international, but everything has pros and cons, right? Where in Girona, it was so nice to have this international community and also the international support. Where, here, if I go to any doctor, I have to speak Spanish. Not many people speak English. And obviously, you also, because of the sports, you have the best of the best in Girona. So that's really good. And that's how I came into Forza. And I'm so happy you're on the podcast now.
Thanks.
So the birth of Forza 13, which isn't just a clinic, right? It's a sports and health co-working space reflecting a different model of care. What was the spark that led you to start Forza? And how did the physiotherapy practice grow into this go-to space that it is now?
So initially, when we first left London, I was about to open my own clinic there.
Okay.
So I was very ready, and I had already started a clinic in Australia before, so I was familiar with starting up my own business, and I didn't want to work for someone else again. I wanted to set up something of my own where the goal was always to have good people work with me. So I didn't want to be just by myself in a single room. I wanted to create a space that other high quality professionals would be attracted to, because my theory is always, if you have the best practitioners, that actually attracts the best clients. So the idea was to have a space where, yeah, the best practitioners, whether that's other physiotherapists or massage therapists, would be attracted to work there. And then over the years, Forza has developed into different ways. Like, so when we first set up, I thought it would be predominantly a co-working space with a lot of desks, which is what we started with. And the therapy side of the business was very small because it started with just me. And really over the time, I guess it's what you put the energy into. So over time, different practitioners have come through. We've had different people change over the years, but now we have a really lovely group of people who are really passionate about what they do. So my partner Chavi, he is a amazing physiotherapist, and his passion is more actually about working with people in the strength and rehabilitation side of the business. So he works with people on retraining and works with a lot of the professionals as well to help them with building up their stability. Then we have other massage therapists who, again, their specialty is more about helping someone prepare for races and managing their soreness. And my specialty is more about diagnosis and working with someone on fixing injuries and sort of stabilization of the core. And I have a few other little, like endofibrosis is a new topic that I like to work on. And so it's this kind of Forza has built over the years with really the therapist as the core. And then that has been something that when people find us, I think they like what we do. We put a lot of ourselves into working one-on-one with people. The other thing is I really do believe in working one on one. So I don't really believe in there are other models of businesses in Spain in particular, but other places where it's you will go, but you'll go on lots of machines. And so you don't really have a physio who will spend that time with you and understand you. And so what we like to do is build that relationship with the client. So we really feel that our clients are part of our community. And then people like that feeling of being really looked after, and we really support individuals in that way. And then they just tell other people. So we don't have any marketing. We don't even have any signage. I never really got around to it. So it's all word of mouth. And I think that really builds a really strong feeling for our clients that once they're in with us, they really do feel like we're part of their team, and we're there for them to help them, whether they're a professional cyclist or whether they're, looking to run their first marathon, or whether they want to do the Tracker 360. Most of our people are very sports and activity based people. And we just look to support them in whatever way they can live their best life. So I think it's that ethos that has led to our good reputation and people really coming back and also referring us more clients. So yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. You did build a beautiful space. I've been there. I am Chavi's patient.
Mhm.
When I got to Girona, everybody, that I was like, oh my God, I need to go to physio. I need to check what's going on with me. Everybody's like, Forza, go to Forza, go to Forza, go to Forza. So I was like, oh yeah, I need to go to this place. Yeah. I was pain free very quickly. It's incredible the work you guys are doing. Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
And now let's dive into Settle Sore 101.
Mm.
So we know that saddle sores can sideline your training, ruin a big ride, or become a chronic issue. But despite how common they are, there's a lot of confusion about why they happen and how to treat them. When it comes to saddle sores, what are the biggest myths and what's the real science behind why they occur?
So I think probably the biggest myth that I've heard, and this usually is with the professionals when we come across the saddle sores, there is that they just need the best. They just need a new saddle. It's the saddle that's the problem. So that's probably the biggest myth that I come across. And then often we'll see that a rider will for a whole season they'll get some sores for some reason, like, oh, I just need a new saddle. I'll try this new saddle. Then they go to another one and another one and another. And by the end of the year, they've sort of tried everything and they end up in the original saddle that they were with. I'm like, oh no, this one feels the best. And through that whole process, usually we will have tried, because there are many things that actually cause a saddle sore. It's not like there is one problem. So for some people, it might be a different saddle does fix something for them. But generally, if you've had the same saddle for a while and all of a sudden you're getting a saddle sore, it's usually a combination of other things. So, one can be if generally you can think of it as a friction issue. So, if you are getting extra rubbing in a certain area, that rubbing will create extra heat. And then over time, the skin will start to break down. And you can have different types of saddle sores as well. You can have little red bumps, they can have some that are actually deeper and they can cause an abscess. They can sometimes become infected. There can be bacteria issues around, and things can like ingrown hairs. So really, it's where that point of contact is on the saddle and what's actually creating that extra pressure and that extra friction. So, chamois can sometimes cause problems. So we've had a case where there was a particular team that had a chamois where there was just a seam in the wrong place. And so a lot of riders were experiencing issues because they just found that, and again, it can be different for women and men. So a chamois that might be appropriate for a man on a woman, because their pelvis is shaped differently, that seam might actually be hitting just the wrong spot. And that, if they're spending 20 hours a week training, there's too much friction there for that skin to actually sustain that. And so then that will create a saddle sore. Also, I think time in the saddle makes sense as well. So if you're someone who maybe rides twice a week and you do 2-hour rides twice a week, and all of a sudden you're on a bike packing trip and you're riding 8 hours a day for 8 days, you're going to this from a very small amount of exposure of pressure on those areas of the skin to a really high exposure of pressure. So again, that skin hasn't adapted. Like if you think about your feet, the same thing. If you walk in shoes the whole time, your skin will be quite soft on the feet. If you start walking around in bare feet, that skin will harden over time. So there is
Yeah.
a little bit of your body will adjust to that over time. And then the other thing that I deal a lot with personally is I look at the balance of the pelvis. So if your pelvis is moving around on the saddle, so if you say have weaker glutes on one side, or if you've got tighter hip flexors on one side, we can get this rotation in the pelvis. And then if we've got this rotation, every time you're moving your pedal stroke around, if your hips are moving side to side or forwards and backwards, they're again creating this little bit of extra friction that's causing, it can create a saddle sore over time. So from a physio point of view, I would actually look at the alignment of their pelvis, the tightness of the hip muscles, the strength of the hip muscles, and then also very important is also the pelvic floor and the deep core muscles. So for me, if I've talked about all these things with a rider and we're thinking, okay, you don't have a much increase in training, or it hasn't been that you've gone from a cold country to a really hot, damp environment, because again, sometimes if it's hotter, if it's sweatier, you can actually create more, like more bacteria will kind of grow. Hygiene also is sometimes not really with the professionals, but sometimes if you're on a bike packing trip, if you're using the same chamois for a few days in a row, then bacteria can actually be a little bit of an issue there. But also, if we've discussed all those things and they're okay, and I'm looking at their pelvics externally and I'm like, look, the balance here is okay, I actually will often send them to a women's health, usually for the females, but a pelvis internal women's health physiotherapist. And they will actually assess the pelvic floor muscles on the inside. So the pelvic floor muscles are really important with the core, and they help to stabilize and control the pelvis. And again, a lot of the times, if these muscles are overly tight, we're not getting the correct relaxation of those muscles, and that can cause more issues around the pelvic floor and therefore around the pelvis. So I would say that really it is a multifactorial issue. When I've spoken to other doctors about this, generally they'll say things like, post rides, you want to use just generally soap and water to clean the area, make sure everything's dry. If possible, with your chamois, washing them every day, having them dry when you start is good. Having good chamois creams. There are different options for people to use. And then if something comes up, you do want to try and treat that quite quickly. You do want to, there are different creams, antibacterial creams and things like this, because a small bump isn't necessarily going to stop someone riding. But if that becomes infected, or if it turns into an abscess, we've had people on some of these long distance rides, like the transcontinental races, where they've continued to ride and ride and ride on these saddle sores, and they've had to stop and get surgery because these abscesses have actually, they've gotten to the point where they've actually needed to sort of clean them out and cut them out. So I definitely don't recommend that. I recommend if you have something, you should probably take time off the bike to allow that tissue to heal, because it's like really important.
So many questions, so much to unpack. Oh my God.
Okay.
I'm going to go a little bit into ultra cycling because that's one of my passions, and I had issues with that. And I do think maybe it's the timing the saddle, because it usually appears like day 3,
hmm
and I have to continue riding, right, to finish. So one of my tricks, which you probably will hate, but I just put like numbing cream so I can get through it and finish, which is just making the problem worse. I'm just not feeling anything. When a rider tell you, myself, I have tried everything and they still show up, what are the most common missing pieces that maybe they are not seeing that I'm not seeing, right? Because like I do the hygiene, I have a good bike fit, I'm doing the chamois cream. I think I have a great, brand that I use. I only use Albion, which I love. I think it's great for women. Has worked for me. I think there's different things that work for different people. It does appear, but again, I am doing all those, 15 hours on the bike. Of course, we train for that, but when we are training, obviously, I'm not doing a week of 10 hours ride every day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for the ultra cycling, it is well. So the first thing is, my question would be, does the saddle sore appear in the same place every time? Because if it does, and it's like, okay, it's always on my right side, it's always in this area,
Yeah.
something like that, we're like, okay, that area has more friction. And so my question would then be, why does that area have more friction? So I'd be looking at you from an anatomical point of view. Okay, do you actually have one leg length different to the other? Do you have, and also taking videos sometimes is really useful. So if you can get someone to take a video of you when you're on the saddle, and can we see, is your pelvis moving up and down, is your pelvis moving side to side? And what we want to then see is if it is, or even actually a saddle mapping. So if you can go to a bike fit and you do a saddle map, are you actually putting more weight on one part of your your saddle than the other? And then musculoskeletal wise, we would want to be doing some testing to see, okay, is there just an imbalance? So we could probably take from the running sports a little bit here, because if we have a 10% difference in strength between the two sides, in a lot of these running sports like football, we generally would say a 10% difference in strength is a 50% increased risk of injury. So on the bike, if you have even a 10% difference between the rotation of your hip or the strength of your quads, or sometimes people have had a collarbone injury. We see this actually quite a bit. They've had a collarbone fracture. They just haven't rehabbed their arm strength so much because they're a cyclist. They don't need to use their arms. Why would you
Yeah.
rehab an arm? And actually, because they're not as strong on one arm, that twists their body a little bit. So we actually have to look a little bit at the whole system and say, what's the history of the injury that could be causing your body just to be a little bit more loaded on one side than the other. So it does take a little bit of sleuthing. It's a bit of a puzzle. So you have to actually go through and look at the whole body as well. So we look at the feet, we look at the hips, we look at the shoulders, we look at the core strength, we look at the glute strength. So that whole analysis probably does take about an hour to actually go through the whole thing. And you also, I would say, you want to go to someone who is a cycling specific therapist, because like before I worked with cycling a lot, I wouldn't have had any idea of how to do that and put it back into how is it applicable to an ultra endurance cyclist. I'd been like, what? You spend 15 hours on the bike? Like, that's insane. Like, who does that? And now I know lots of people, I've done that. So it's like lots of people do that. So, I would say if you've done all the other things, my guess would be there's probably something physically that's causing a little bit of extra pressure in that area. And then it's sometimes a quick fix, and sometimes it's like, all right, well, if you have one leg longer than the other, like I have that. And so I tend to have a tendency to have more saddle sores on the right side of my body if I haven't been training, particularly if I haven't been doing my strength work in the gym, and I just go out and do like 3 weeks of heaps of riding. I'll tend to find that will be my side. It's my weak side, and that's my side that will have problems. So with my leg length difference, I just know I'm never going to change that, but I can compensate by doing my strength work, so it's not so much of a problem. So we all have imbalances in our body. No one's got the perfect mold. And so I think my opinion is a lot of it is about building your body's resilience, building your body's strength to compensate for those imbalances that we have. And so that's where I also think some people get trapped with trying to find the perfect bike fit. They're like, oh, if I just move my cleat like 1 millimeter to the left, and if I just raise my handlebars 1 millimeter, and if I just tilt my saddle nose down 1 millimeter, that's going to make all the difference. And I'm thinking, after 15 hours of riding your bike, like that stuff goes out the window. Like you're just getting by however you can.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's generally my opinion, is trying to find there should be something that's causing it underlying, and you probably just haven't quite found what it is yet.
It makes so much sense and a huge eye opener. And I hope everybody listening are taking notes at what speaks to them. Because one thing that you said that spoke to me was, the arms. It's something that I would never think about a saddle sore. But now that you said it, I know sometimes I'm more sore in one side, and it's probably because it's my dominant arm and I'm putting more strength there, which, like you said, is causing an imbalance in my body. And maybe after 15-hour days for 3 4 days, of course something is rubbing the wrong way, and not something that can be solved on a bike fit or the best bib shorts or the best chamois cream. It's really your imbalance that we need to work on. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely that's one of the things that Xavi and I do a lot of work on is looking at the whole system, and then making sure that we do give even our professional cyclists, the road cyclists, we always try and give them something for their upper body, because most of the time with their gym programs, it's neglected. And a lot of the times, because we're always looking at their power numbers, we're always looking at this, that, and the other. But if you're trying to do the Tour de France, you are doing a lot of kilometers. And by the end of the day, that last sprint at the end, it might be that strength in the arms that does it. Or as you say, if someone's developing saddle sores, it might be that imbalance at the end. That's the difference between, well, in Kasia Niewiadoma's case, when she won the Tour de France, it was a 4-second difference, so all those tiny things can add up. So I think that's well, that's one of the beautiful things about the sport as well. Like it's there's so much effort that goes in, but sometimes it's these little adjustments that actually can make a 1% difference, that in the end can be the result of finishing your own race or winning the Tour de France Femmes. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Small gains.
Exactly.
Um, Writers often lump everything under the term settle sore, but what they are feeling can vary a lot from skin irritation to deep, painful nodules. Can you break down the different types of settle sores in you see in ultra riders or in riders in general, and how the approach should differ depending on what's actually happening?
So I would say first up, I'm not an expert in the differences. So I don't do
Okay.
any examinations of the saddle sores themselves. So
Yeah.
I actually send them to this wonderful women's health physiotherapist that I have in Girona here, Raquel. So she will often do, if there's a lot of inflammation around the area, she will often use machines that riders have said is really useful, like Endiva machines. Or basically have things to help reduce the swelling. So I will generally ask the rider, are we looking at sort of inflamed areas? So particularly in the women, we can get like the labia can become very inflamed and large on one side. So it's not just a single point of soreness. It can be this chronic inflammation that actually causes the tissue to get large and swollen. And there's a lovely pro cyclist, her name's Loretta Hansen, and she has been very open about some of her struggles with uh, uh, get swelling, and she had to have surgery. She's very open about this on her social media. So she actually needed surgery in the area, which a lot of professionals do, but they don't really talk about it often because the tissue becomes swollen and inflamed. And so therefore, if the tissue is more inflamed and more swollen, that creates more of a problem. So often they'll need surgery to actually cut away some of that extra tissue to then allow them to continue to race as a professional. So that's
Wow.
where things can kind of go as it progresses. Whereas if we're talking just about a small, like an open wound on the skin, so those will be like a very superficial friction, which is more like almost like a burn that kind of rubs away the first few layers. Whereas again, if you're talking about those deeper ones, it's usually that pressure build up, and it's more like it can be almost closer to the bone, and those can become quite sort of feels like a hard lump on the inside. So those ones again, those are often the ones that need to be cut away because they can't just they often won't heal by themselves because it becomes like an abscess on the inside. So like a almost like a pimple on the inside, which can just
Okay.
grow and grow and grow.
Wow.
So those ones as well, like I don't treat any of those specifically. However, if it's something like just a swollen area, one of the recommendations we would say is for the women, and particularly if they're swollen after the races, they can get a pad that you would normally use for menstruation. And if you fill it with water and get it soaked, and then you can put it in the freezer, and you
Oh,
can
wow.
actually then mold it, like once it's defrosted a little bit, you can mold it to the shape of your pelvis and wear it in underpants. So things like using ice in that area if you are sore and swollen after riding for long periods of time. If there's heat and swelling, generally we would say use ice through that area to help reduce inflammation. That's really not going to be as effective on, say, the friction stuff. So the friction stuff is more keep it clean and let the skin heal. And then the abscess stuff is a bit harder, I think. The abscess stuff is more like, I think you often just need to give it time. Um, which sometimes riders can't do. Or if you're having a race and you just need to numb it for a few days, okay, fine. But you also need to have the understanding that, all right, I'm making this decision. I'm an adult. I can make decisions, and I choose to go forward, knowing that you might have a little bit of a have to take time off when you finish to allow that tissue to heal. And so I think a lot of it is about knowing what you're dealing with. Are you dealing with a lot of inflammation? Are you dealing with an abscess? Are you dealing with just a small skin irritation that's not going to bother you? And if you continue to ride through that, is that going to have any future consequences? Or are you actually looking at, no, this is just something I need to get through? And it's like, running on a swollen ankle through a race. It's like, fine, it's going to be sore for a few days, but I choose to do it.
Right.
So those would be the main ones that I generally hear about. And then as soon as they're at that level, I will usually refer them to a sports doctor so they can get appropriate creams and medications. Or, as I said, my women's health physiotherapist who would do more inflammatory treatments around that area.
Got it. Great tip on soaking the pad with water
Mm,
and icing it. That's a
hmm
very, very good one. You were talking about swelling and temperature regulation affecting the settle sore development. How can a rider realistic manage these factors during an event?
So for ultra endurance or more for like a pro cyclist, or what are
I
we
think
sort of
I
thinking?
think ultra or regular riders like doing a bike packing event or ultra event,
Hmm. Hmm.
because I think pros, they already have like a team with
They do. They have a
professionals
medical
like you
team.
that will help them.
Yeah.
But maybe the listeners that are more weekend warriors or racers that are listening, like what do you think? Like, what is a tip that you can share that would help them through these events?
Yeah, so I think the one of the ones that actually isn't mentioned a lot because it's often a personal thing, but also what people do with pubic hair. So if people wax, if they shave, if they let things grow out a little bit, like those also have consequences because the generally speaking, hair can be a little bit protective through the air. It gives a little bit extra padding. So if someone was asking me about going for an ultra endurance test, I wouldn't recommend they like shave on day one because as those hairs are growing through, that's actually also going to be an area where the skin is more open. So therefore, bacteria can come in a little bit more, and that could cause some problems. So generally speaking, like waxing or shaving, you would want to plan when you're going to do those things. And also, generally having a little bit of hair in the area can be a little bit of benefit, or sometimes people feel like too much hair is also a little bit of a negative. So it's kind of finding that balance of what can help them. So I'd say that would be one of the things to have a little think about as to what suits them. I would definitely, if for an ultra event, I would be using a lot of chamois cream. So I think the more chamois cream you can use, particularly if you're not someone who is doing multiple endurance races again and again and again, you've got that ability to build up that tissue tolerance. If you're doing, yeah, you're only able to cycle only like one long ride a weekend and maybe two shorter rides through the week because you have a normal life and you have a normal job, then I would say actually using a like extra chamois cream to create that friction, reducing that friction would be the other thing I would recommend. um and just being almost as like, you don't have to use any special soaps or anything, but just keeping the area clean as much as possible. So a good general soap, drying the area after, and if you do have any open wounds, treating them with some sort of antibacterial. So whether it's a betadine or whether it is like a, depends what country you're in, but there are lots of good creams that are generally antibacterial. So if you then, I mean, it's hard when you're doing ultra, like, how are you going to get access to cold ice to sort of make an area like reduce? So, I mean, maybe it's if you, there's a cold stream, you could actually just sit in a cold stream for a while and actually let that area. So, if you're in a hot country, say you're doing Badlands in southern Spain, like, actually, I don't know if there's any cold. Yeah, so I think there's a part where it maybe goes near the ocean. So it would be, all right, is it worth just sitting in the ocean for 20 minutes and just allowing that area to cool down? That also has consequences because if it's in a salty area, then sometimes the salt can create, I don't know, it's cooling down would be one option if someone has access to that. Keeping everything clean is the other option. And then also just, I have had people do, I have had people, I have seen people do crazy things like put extra padding or like
Double
cutting out
padding.
areas. Oh, double padding and stuff. And at that point, I have no personal experience in that, and I'm just like, they got to do what they got to do. So if it works for them, then do it. So, yeah, that's probably all I have on that answer.
Desperate time, desperate measurements.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, you touched on chamois cream. Is it okay to use baby diaper cream versus made for cycling chamois cream? Do you have an opinion on that, or it doesn't matter?
I I don't have an opinion on it. I mean, I use ASOS just because I always have and I like it. But I have also tried actually just a cheaper one from Decathlon, and I found that one was kind of okay too. So I don't know if. there would be a reason why you couldn't use one over the other. So I think it would be a personal preference. I would actually try the different ones, and if it agrees with you, great. There's probably quite a bit of marketing. I know ASOS has a female version, a male version. I've tried both. I don't think there's a difference. I think it's just one is pink and one is blue, but maybe they have different ingredients. I don't know. But again, I think it's a really personal preference. And some people don't use chamois creams at all. Like I know some pro riders who are just like, nope, never used it, don't need it. But again, their tolerance is probably built up because they're averaging 20 to 25 hours on the bike a week. So they're fine with it. So I do think it's useful for people who are a bit more like going from small amounts to large amounts. I think something is better than nothing.
Makes sense. Makes sense. One question I have, I don't know if it'll make sense, but saddle pain doesn't just affect the body, it wears on confidence, motivation, and even decision making sometimes, especially
Mm.
if you're doing an ultra or bike packing. From your experience, how much of saddle sore management is physical versus psychological? Like, how can riders protect their
Yeah.
mental game?
That's a really interesting question. I think a lot of that comes down to knowledge. So, if the person has a good understanding of what the problem is, then it doesn't necessarily change the pain of the problem, but it can change the fear of not knowing what it is. So, we often will um, uh, there's an anxiety and there's a fear around injuries. So it and having that knowledge of like, okay, well, this is what the problem is. I know why this problem is. And so therefore I can make a decision about this problem. Whereas if you're like, okay, I'm going into something and this pain is coming up, but I don't know why it's there. I don't know if it's going to get worse. I don't know if I'm going to cause myself damage. Then that's a question that will just continue to play again and again in the mind, and you're going to be using actually up energy and mental space trying to solve a problem that you don't have the answers for. So I think a lot of the time it would be actually getting the knowledge beforehand. So again, example with yourself, if you know after 15 hours you're going to get a saddle sore, like that's fine if you know why, and then you can be like, cool, this saddle sore is going to come up, but I know if I just put my numbing cream on it, I'm going to get through it and it's not going to cause me a problem long term. So if you have that knowledge that you've actually solved that, you've kind of solved you haven't necessarily solved the root cause of the problem, but you actually have a solution and you know you're not causing yourself long-term damage. Where if someone's going into that and they're like, and they don't know why, if they're getting this problem and it's caused them to abandon a race before, and say they're day two of a transcontinental and this thing has come up and they've had to abandon previously, that's going to cause them a lot of stress. And so I would, if they had already had an abandoned race before, I would be putting in quite a lot of effort to solve the problem before it starts, or at least get understanding of the problem before it starts, so that when it comes up they actually already have uh, things they can try to fix. And if they know, look, I can't fix this right now, they know, okay, well, what's the likely outcome going to be if I keep pushing through this? Am I giving myself long term damage, or is this just going to be a pain thing? Because often cyclists, we do say, look, you have to ride through pain sometimes. It's not like a pain will stop everyone, but if we know that the pain doesn't necessarily mean damage, then fine. Okay, you just have to suck it up. Like it's going to be sore for 3 days, but if that's what it is, then you can go in your mind. You can go, okay, look, it's pain. I'm going to block that out. It's not going to be a big problem for me, and then I can focus on what I need to focus on. But if you're constantly questioning what's going on, that's going to, I think, really stress people out and really get in their heads and probably be more of a problem than potentially what the pain actually is itself.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. For writers listening, it could feel a little bit overwhelming, the complexity of all of this.
Mm.
Is there one meaningful change to reduce saddle sore severity or frequency that you would prioritize?
I'm biased because I think that strength and balance of the pelvis is really, really important. So, my big bias is that I think everyone should have good core muscles and I think everyone should have good glute muscles. And so, I think if you can do even a really basic program where you're it doesn't have to be even a full gym program, but I really like riders to be able to do something where they're engaging their core a little bit or engaging their glutes a little bit before they ride. So my go-to would be something like a dead bug exercise. People can look this up, like a dead bug exercise. a type of clam exercise. There's one I call an advanced clam, which is a little bit more laying on the front, 45 degrees down, lifting a knee. I think someone has that on there's a YouTube video I saw. They didn't call it advanced clam, they called it uh, like clam lock or hip lock clam, something like that. Go research that if you want. But that's a really good one because it gets gluteus medius working and less of the TFL. So a bit technical, but some of the TFL muscle is one of the side hip muscles that often cyclists get very tight and overactive. And if that's the case, it doesn't really stabilize the pelvis. It means the pelvis moves from side to side. So really what we want to see is if you're getting good glute medius activation, that will help stabilize. If your deep core is working quite well, that will help to stabilize. Then we want to look at the flexibility around the hips. So you want to make sure you've got enough hip flexion. So a pigeon stretch is really good for that one. And then we also want to look at and making sure that people have enough internal and external rotation, because particularly if you're limited in internal rotation, then when your knee is coming up to top dead center of the pedal stroke, often the knee will drop out to the side. And so you won't be able to maintain like that sort of smooth piston like movement, and you'll actually your pelvis and your spine will rotate to compensate as that knee is coming up to top dead center, and that will actually cause some rotation. So my bias is that if they have a strong core, strong glutes, particularly gluteus medius, and also they have the flexibility around the hips to create enough space as their leg is coming through, that should actually create a stable pelvis and help to reduce the friction that they're getting from that excessive movement. And also, if they're getting the excessive movement when they're sort of later in the day, so if they're good for a couple of hours, it might be that they're fatiguing. So you can also look at what their wattage is like and what their effort feels like. Or you could get someone to take a video of you when you're 3 hours into a ride versus 1 hour into a ride. And are you starting to look like you're losing your stability? And so therefore you might be good for the first hour. Or if someone just looks at you on a bike fit where you're there for, you're riding for 20 minutes, it might actually be as you're fatiguing. So it could be a core weakness or a hip strength weakness that's not showing up in those initial phases, but that might be coming on further down in your rides when you're a little bit more fatigued. So I would say that's my go-to for someone to really look at, and they can totally do that by themselves at home.
Strength and mobility, all this comes down to this on everything. So it's also injury prevention. So those are great tips. We should all incorporate. I already do the dead bug. I'll try to look those up and put some links on the episode
Yeah,
description.
yeah, do.
um, is there anything I missed that you would like to share, or you think we covered all?
I think that's pretty much it in terms of saddle sores. Yeah, generally my thing is just I would love to see cyclists do that little bit of work off the bike. Like that's really the thing that I see most injuries. So whether it's knee pain or back pain, a lot of the time it's because people just don't really know what they should do, or they actually do too much. So the other one is often people just stretch too much, but they don't do the strength work, or they think, oh, I need to do an hour of activations before I ride. It's like, well, actually, no, it's just kind of doing some couple of things that really target the area and keeping it simple. I think a lot of the time people, like there's so many videos online. Like if you just try to search, it becomes really overwhelming really quickly of, oh, I should do this and I should do this and I should do this. It's like, well, just do one core, do one glute, do a couple of stretches around the hips. And actually, if you're doing those and they feel quite good, you don't have to make it necessarily a lot more complicated. And I guess the last thing would be if you are finding that you're having issues where something is coming up again and again and again, one of the things is if you've been stretching a tight hamstring for, I don't know, 4 weeks and the hamstring still is staying tight, it's probably not a tight hamstring. It's probably something else.
Got it.
So if you're trying something and you're like, look, I've tried this for a month, it should be changing. And if it's not, you just might be, you're probably doing the wrong thing. Um, so at that point, if you can't fix that yourself, I would say, yeah, go to someone and just get an analysis. And hopefully there's someone that is a cyclist as well, because I think having a therapist who does also ride is they will talk your language. So I think that's
Yeah.
quite a nice one to step in, and you can say, "Oh, I've been doing zone 2, or I've been doing this," and they're just nodding along, going, "I understand what you're talking about," rather than sort of not really understanding what a cyclist will do and what that training involves. I think that's quite a good one to find the right people to support you in what you do. I think that's really good to have that right sort of create your team that supports you in your goals. I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. I find it so funny when people are like, "Oh, but my doctor said I could go back to running or I could go back to cycling." I was like, "Did you explain exactly what your running and cycling are, is?" Because a lot of times if the doctor doesn't know exactly your load, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, of course you should go cycling, it will help, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't know that you're doing like 8 hours, 10 hour training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly. It's quite
yeah,
funny. And then also, and often friends don't understand. You could talk to your friends about, oh,
yeah.
I have this. And they're like, what? You're crazy. Like, what are you doing? And, but
Mhm.
then when you're in your own community, I was like, oh, yeah, 8 hour ride. That must have been nice. You must have seen
Yeah,
some good things. So
yeah,
I think finding the
absolutely.
right people who speak your language is a really important way to, yeah, just kind of, yeah, have people that understand what you're doing. I think that's important.
Yeah, agree. Well, Kat, thank you so much for being part of Zone 2. I am thrilled to have you, and I hope this is the first of many episodes that you can come and contribute and talk about different type of injury preventions and everything cycling.
Yeah, would love to come back. We should do it again.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's all for today's episode. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in. Your support means everything. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider following, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends.